I said he was ungrateful and causing me pain. Didn't he see that I couldn't sleep at night, worrying because he was here? You can imagine how I hated saying it. I could see the abimon on his face, like a wound. But it was the only thing I knew that would make him go. She had been right. He had gone. What she hadn't realized was how final that leaving would be. Today, I am thinking about the word Ma used. Abhiman, that mix of love and anger and hurt, which lies at the heart of so many of our Indian stories, and for which there is no word in English. If Tarun pushed her away, would the red-haired girl feel Abhiman? Or can we only experience such a feeling when the language of our childhood has made it real in our mouths? My mother's letter made me sad, but it was sadness of a peculiar, distant kind. I knew how serious the situation in Calcutta was, but somehow my own problems seemed more real than my mother's. The pain of my daughter's first teeth coming through, the bad smell in our apartment, the arguments every evening with Sandeep, which were always followed by uneasy lovemaking. A few weeks later, when Tarun arrived in Vermont and rang me, his voice over the phone line was edged with a sharp silver need. But it belonged to that other faraway life and didn't touch me. I hated this change in myself. I realized I could no longer feel for other people or understand their fears and worries. But what to do about it? Did anyone else suffer from such a disease? I was afraid to ask Sandeep, the only person I knew well enough in America to ask. I kept my mother's letter for a long time at the bottom of my jewelry case, and then during a move to a new house, I lost the letter. By then, it was too late anyway. The first few months after moving to this country, Tarun called me almost every day. He hated cooking for himself, hated coming home in the evenings to an empty room. It was so cold in Vermont. He felt he was slowly freezing. I forced myself not to listen to the desperate note in his voice. Sandeep was firmly against any family, his or mine, coming to live with us. So I used to say to Tarun things like, "We all went through the same thing. Before you know it, you'll get used to this lifestyle." It was hard to think of anything more helpful to say with the baby screaming in my ear or the rice boiling over, and Sandeep, like most husbands brought up in India, no help at all. Tarun was usually silent for a moment. Then he used to say goodbye in a quiet voice. For a long time, I didn't know about the bad feeling between Ma and Tarun, although I wonder now whether it was more that I didn't want to know. I'd had my second baby by then, and Sandeep and I were finally falling in love. I was afraid that even one careless word could destroy our little house of kisses. So when I rang up India, and Ma said it had been a long time since she had heard from Tarun, she was too proud to say any more. Could I call him and make sure he was okay? I never let myself take it seriously. "Oh, Ma," I used to say brightly, "stop worrying. He isn't a baby anymore." Then I left a short message on Tarun's phone, telling him to write home and adding something cheerful about his nieces. Those days, I worked hard at being cheerful, because Sandeep had told me that men disliked miserable women. Still, one night after Ma had been more anxious than usual, I spoke to Sandeep. I waited until after lovemaking, when he was usually in a generous mood, and asked him if Tarun could stay with us for the summer holidays. "I'm the only family he has here after all," I said, And he's always been so shy, not the kind to make lots of friends. Sandeep touched my face lightly. We're just getting to know each other. Let's give ourselves and Tarun a little more time alone, shall we? When I hesitated, he sighed. That's the trouble with our Indian families, always worrying too much. Your brother's probably having a great time at college. For all you know, he has plenty of girlfriends and would rather you didn't keep checking on him. I wanted to tell Sandeep, who was an only child, about those afternoons in Calcutta, the smell of cooking, the way when Tarun entered the kitchen, a certain seriousness in his face fell away. But Sandeep was yawning, and in a moment he would remind me he had to get up early and go to work. Why didn't I argue or threaten? Sandeep needed a wife as much as I needed a husband. He feared aloneness as much as I did. But in those early days, I was too unsure of myself, too much in love with being in love. It was easier to tell myself, as I lay against the warm curve of his back in the sweet tiredness after lovemaking, that I would have a real heart-to-heart talk with Tarun next weekend. But something always happened next weekend, and the one after, and the one after, until Tarun's calls became shorter and less frequent, and his pauses were longer than all his words put together. But I wasn't listening. Let me tell you what we did yesterday, I used to say brightly into the silence, into the years that hurried past us. Then I came back from seeing our mother in India and called him to say I had to come and see him immediately. He replied in a carefully polite voice, "Sure, come if you like." It hasn't been easy to talk to Tarun here. When I reminded him of past times in the kitchen in Calcutta, he suddenly remembered something he had to do and went out. Left alone in his apartment, I sat in front of the TV, looking at its empty black face. I thought of the intelligence of wild things, birds, insects, how they could communicate without words, without sound. The sudden movement of a wing, the waving of a tail, food, home. This way danger lies. I wanted to touch my brother's fingers and feed into his body all the feelings that were jumping around inside mine. The trip I took last month to Calcutta to see my mother was my first, since I had left as a new bride 10 years before. As soon as I saw her at the airport, where she had come against the doctor's advice, I knew that she was dying. It was the look in her eyes, the way she stared past me for a moment when I came out of the arrivals area. She seemed not to recognize me, and I thought she was looking beyond me for someone else. I am on the boat, looking out blindly, counting on my frozen fingers the people I love. Sandeep, my daughters, my mother, my brother. It is a pitifully short list, and does not cheer me up at all. My mother is dying. Perhaps she is already dead. How much of my husband's fondness for me is simply daily habit? In how many ways will my daughters and I disappoint each other as they grow up? And my brother? Is he as anxious for me to go as I am to leave? Don't cry, I order myself. Make yourself smile. You did your best. You're going home tomorrow. Look! Tarun is pointing to something white on a nearby piece of floating ice. I hope my eyes haven't turned red and try to show some interest. Will this miserable boat trip never end? Look! It's some sort of large bird with thin red legs. As the boat gets closer, it spreads its white wings and looks calmly at us. I've seen a bird like this somewhere before. Dee. Doesn't it look like a sharash? Yes, indeed, it does. But I am more surprised by the Bengali name for the bird, so unexpected in my brother's mouth. And the childhood name for me, which he hasn't used for years, Dee. A small word of love, like a magic jewel from one of my mother's stories. I remember when we last saw Sharash. It is soon after my father's death. I am 8, my brother 3. My mother has sent us to stay at third uncle's house, out in the country. We are homesick and miserable, and do not get on with our cousins, who know how to milk cows and swim across the river. We hurt ourselves trying to climb trees with them, and they laugh at us when we cry. But one day, after a morning filled with rain, the sun comes out and Tarun and I run across the fields. We get muddy from head to toe, but we don't care. Perhaps we can reach the railway, jump on a passing train, and make our way back to our mother in Calcutta. Then suddenly we see them, 15 or 20 sharash feeding in the flooded rice fields. My brother lifts his delighted hands. Look, Dee, as the birds fly up, a speeding cloud of silver light. For a moment the sky is full of wings, whiteness and possibility. We stand with our arms around each other until they disappear. The ferry is closer now, and everyone is looking at the bird. Even the noisy young men are quiet. The bird's eyes shine. It looks back at us, at me. I am sure of this. It has flown all the way from Bengal, out of the old stories, to bring me a message that will save us, if only I can hear it. Some dreams are essential. We need them to live by. Before I returned to the United States, I begged my mother to come and live with me. She refused. I want to die in the house where your father died, where you were born, you and Taru. What can I do for you, Mother? What will make you happy? Seeing my children before I die. But I am here, Mother. Seeing my children before I die. Seeing my children? All of us in dark caves, our fingers painful from scratching at the stone, searching for that tiny crack in the rock, the edge of a door opening into love. Suddenly, I am glad about the girl with the red gold hair. The bird rises into the air, beating its strong wings, wheeling confidently over our heads. I'm certain my brother doesn't remember that long-ago day in the countryside. Still, I step closer, touch his arm. At first, I think he's going to move away. Then he puts his arm round my shoulders and holds me tight for a moment. Tonight, I will tell my brother a story. Once there was a widow woman who had 2 children. I'll tell it the way the old stories were told, without guilt or blame, out of sadness and hope to keep memory alive. Maybe he won't listen, and maybe he will. We stand side by side, shoulders touching. The wind blows through us, a wild, intelligent wind. The white bird flies directly into the sun,